What is up, y'all? My name is Robert Donaldson, and today I'm actually joined by my buddy and a certified Dua Lipa lover, David
It's
Eickholt.
true.
You can find him on Twitter at David Eickholt, and definitely go and check his work out over at Hawkeye Insider for 24/7 Sports as well. Not just saying this because he's a friend. This dude is definitely one of the best at what he does, especially if you are into Iowa sports. So, very glad to be joined by him as we break down the Big Ten tournament. It's getting real, folks. We are narrowing down within 6 days of Selection Sunday, of March Madness, really getting into full craziness. And man, David, when you look at kind of, I guess, the regular season that was in the Big Ten, what are your main kind of takeaways when you look at the bracket, the seeding, teams that fell flat, played up,
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I think you need to give a lot of credit to Northwestern. Chris Collins, the job he did this season was absolutely spectacular. I think the Big Ten's talented, but I also think it's more of a high floor league than a high ceiling league. Like, I don't know how many teams are elite. Purdue has a chance to be, but they've lost 4 out of their last 8. Zach Edey was Big Ten Player of the Year. But there's a reason why I think seeds two through 9 were up in the air till the very last day. I mean, that's unprecedented.
Yeah.
So, I think that's my big takeaways. I thought there'd be some elite teams. I thought Michigan would be better than they were this season. I mean, they're still technically a bubble team. Michigan State, I still think, can be dangerous if they really get the pieces going. Tyson Walker strikes me as a guard that can carry you in March. He just has that sort of big gamesmanship. And Illinois, I certainly thought would be much farther along than they are. And it'll be interesting. But the league beat up on each other again, Rob. I don't know how that's going to translate to March. And that just seems to be the common trend here, especially over the past decade of Big Ten basketball.
Yeah, and what I'll say as far as just kind of like a national perspective, when you look at the Big Ten, it's probably one of the more scrutinized conferences because of the performances in the NCAA tournament recently. You kind of go back the last time a team like seriously made a deep run. It was a Michigan, it was a Michigan State, maybe even Purdue, but even Purdue's run last year was cut by St. Peter's. Everybody thought they had the best draw of that kind of group in the Elite Eight. But
Yeah.
what are you kind of thinking as far as that kind of scrutiny goes? Because yeah, again, we have Purdue at the top of the spearhead in the conference with a big man that they kind of run their entire team through. Then you look at Indiana, another team that it's going to be a really trendy pick to make a run if you kind of believe in the big man theory. But again, Trace Jackson Davis, as dominant as he is going to pick up that scrutiny for being who he is. What are your kind of
Yeah.
thoughts when you kind of perceive that kind of scrutiny that comes from the people criticizing the Big Ten?
First of all, Trace Jackson Davis was my vote for Big Ten Player of the Year. I think he was more consistent on both sides of the ball than Zach Edey. And with all due respect to Zach Edey, because he was absolutely dominant this season. But the importance of Trace Jackson Davis to the Indiana team is crazy. But, I think there's some warrant for criticism there when it comes to the big men and when it comes to the Big Ten. I mean, Luka Garza is one of the best big men in Big Ten history. We saw how far he could take Iowa. Now, Iowa had some injuries. They had a really, really bad matchup with Oregon. I mean, if you would have looked at the entire bracket, for example, heading into that tournament, Oregon would have been a top 5 team. I would have said, yeah, you really don't want Iowa to play them. They just, that, Rob. I mean, they're athletic. They could shoot. They could rebound. They run them up and down the floor. I think that could be the same way with Purdue. I don't trust Purdue's guards to be able to get it done in March. I haven't seen enough of them. I think they're going to be good players. I think they're already good players, but not March lead you to greatness type. And when you look at the trend in Big Ten basketball, when you look at the trend in NCAA, great guard play carries you. And that's why I've said from the start, if Peyton Sandford can average 18, if Tony Perkins can be that menace that we've seen on both sides of the ball for Iowa, I think Iowa can be very, very dangerous in March. But if Tony Perkins has an off game and Aaron Eulis doesn't show up, Chris Murray, Philip Obracha have been very consistent this season. That doesn't win you games, the big ones. So I look at the Big Ten tournament and I look at, okay, who has the best guard play? Who has the easiest path to get there? And that's why I keep falling. Like Michigan State right now, I'm a really, really big fan of. I think Hauser is a proven commodity for them down low. He's been able to do an inside-out style of game. Tyson Walker. I think Jay Atkins is going to continue to really, really step up from the 3-point line. I mean, he has a beautiful shooting stroke, and Tom Izzo knows how to win in March. So when you look at the conference, when you look at the big men, I don't know if they can carry you through to the Big Ten final or a Big Ten tournament. I'm looking at the guys that say, hey, guess what? We have consistent, serviceable big men, but we have guards that are fearless and are capable of making shots. And that's when you look at Indiana, right? Mm-hmm. Is Jalen Hood Schifino going to be the one that dropped 35, or are we going to watch him go 1 for 11 for the game? And that's going to be a big, big deal for me when I look at Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And you kind of touched on points. I think we align as far as our thinking of what actually plays in a tournament-like setting. And let's actually get right into the bracket here and to give you guys kind of a general baseline of how this tournament plays out. So it's going to be all on a neutral floor in Chicago at the United Center. Last year, when you look at this tournament, it played everything but chalk. You know, a lot of these tournaments that we've been talking about as far as mid-majors go, or even some of the power conference tournaments, it's been, you know, the 1 versus 2 in the final, or the 1, 2, 3, 4 are in the semifinal. Well, last year, you look at the teams who made the semifinal. You have the 9 seed, you have the 7 seed, you have the 5 seed, you have the 3 seed. So this is one of those conferences that unless there's like one team really spearheading it, and I don't really think there is, you're going to have a lot of parity. You're going to have a lot of teams, a lot of great games, and a lot of upsets. So as we kind of look in that first round in the 12-13 spot between Wisconsin and Ohio State, man, you want to talk about two teams who just absolutely shit the bed this year, essentially. I mean, Wisconsin had ridiculously high hopes after their non-con play, you know, taking Kansas down to the wire in the Battle of Atlantis, and all of a sudden they enter into the Big Ten play and it's just a downhill slide. Obviously Tyler Wall missed some time, but still. And you look at Ohio State again, you know, in non-con play they looked pretty impressive. Even started Big Ten play not looking that terrible, and all of a sudden it just fell off for them. So, you know, one of those teams is getting eliminated in round 1. David, who are you taking to advance to play Iowa in the second round?
Yeah, first of all, Wisconsin is exactly who we've all known Wisconsin to be and what they should have been for the past 4 years. Like, Wisconsin has overachieved with the roster year after year. I'd rather watch paint dry. I'd rather mow the grass. I'd rather do yard work than watch Wisconsin basketball. Okay, I hate that style of basketball. I have to pick Wisconsin. I think Ohio State's just trending down. I think Bryce Sensabaugh, if he can stay out of foul trouble and take a high volume of shots, I think they have a good shot. And I think Bruce Thornton's going to continue to really, really emerge next season as a premier guard in the Big Ten. I think he's got so much upside. We'll obviously see what happens with Bronny James. I think he's going to be in a Buckeye. But I think Chris Holtman's a better coach. I'm very curious what he's going to look like at the end of this season. I'm going to take Wisconsin just because it'd be the most Wisconsin thing to do, is to be a bomb 3 team and make a run in the Big Ten tournament. That's who they are. Greg Gard is still a very good coach. I don't like his style of play, but he's a proven winner and they find a way to win. So I'm going to go Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of fair points. I'm not going to buy into the culture kind of play on Wisconsin. I'm going to go Ohio State. I think there was a point in the last 5 games or so for Ohio State where I don't know what kind of happened. They were getting the bricks beat off them game after game, and all of a sudden they just started to kind of play a lot better. I mean, even their most recent game against Michigan State, where they did lose by 7 or 8, they were in that game throughout the entire way. And I think Michigan State is one of those trendy, playing really well kind of teams. And obviously Ohio State has the win over Illinois as well in that span. I just think Ohio State has the ability potentially to correct some things, which is kind of funny considering Zedke was supposed to be the guy. He got hurt, and all of a sudden they played better. I mean, I'm going to take a shot here with Ohio State to advance the second round, but we'll see kind of how far they move past that.
Yeah.
As we go to the 11-14, this is an interesting one because Nebraska, Minnesota. Nebraska has been playing a lot better recently. Obviously, they finished with a win in Iowa City on Iowa Senior Day to end the season, and they've been just kind of rolling for a little bit now. Keisei Tominaga has been just an electric factory. This guy is the prototypical guy you want to have on your team in March. Unfortunately, the team around him maybe isn't the best, but how do you see this kind of playing out here?
Look, I think Fred Hoiberg saved his job this year. I think with the job that he's done, Keisei Tominaga is one of the most fun players to watch in the Big Ten Conference. I highly, highly encourage people to watch him. By the way, his highlights get hundreds of thousands of views because he's like an idol from Japan. Like it's ridiculous, his game by game highlights, how much attention they get. I'm gonna go Nebraska. I just think that the momentum's riding them. Derek Walker was second team all Big Ten. I think it was well deserved. I think they do have some decent shooters. Jamarcus Lawrence had 5 threes against Iowa. Now look, Iowa's perimeter defense was non-existent in that game. Let's just call it what it was. It wasn't good. They put all the attention to stopping Derek Walker. Other guys stepped up. Sam Griesel, I think, is the guy that can at least get them 1 win, maybe 2 wins, even in the Big Ten tournament. I just think Nebraska's been more consistent, and I'll vote for the better defensive team. I think Nebraska has a slightly better offense than Minnesota. I don't think Nebraska's offense is very good, but Nebraska's defense and their defensive rotations have really, really impressed me this season. Yeah, they gave up 77 to Iowa, but when you just look at the degree of difficulty on some of those shots that Iowa just hit in that game, and you look how quick Hoiberg's rotations are, you got to tip your cap to them. So I'm going to go Nebraska.
Yeah, I think what was kind of interesting watching their season progress is there were times where they would top out at 60, if even that. And then you watch a game like against Iowa, and all of a sudden it just feels like they can't miss. So definitely a volatile team, and sometimes you kind of want that volatility in tournament play just because, you can get those kind of upset polls because of that. So, yeah, I'm going to take Nebraska as well to advance over to play Maryland in the second round. But now we go up to that 8-9 matchup between Michigan and Rutgers. You want to talk about two teams that have all the motivation in the entire world. I think these might be the two most motivated teams in the entire country when you look at, their opening round tournament matchup, because loser's done. I mean, they're not making the tournament. Winner probably maybe has to still win one more, but again, that's kind of where the motivation side of it comes into play. So, what are you thinking as far as this Michigan-Rutgers matchup?
I'm really excited for this. So I'm going to be obviously covering the game after it. I'm getting in my seat early for this one because I really, really want to watch this one unfold. I come back to 2 questions in this one, or 2 things. One, who has the higher ceiling? Michigan has the higher ceiling. Who has the best overall player on the floor? Michigan with Hunter Dickinson. Those 2 things, I think Cliff Omeniri can make things really difficult on Dickinson. But I think Dickinson's got the willpower to get them there. I think Jet Howard, assuming he's 100% healthy, is a good enough, lethal enough shooter. Kobe Buffkin has played phenomenal, I think, over the past 3 or 4 games. I think he's averaging about 23 an outing right now. And I still think Juwan Howard's a really good coach. So I'm going to go Michigan on this. Caleb McConnell can make things interesting. Rutgers right now, I just don't think they can score to keep up with Michigan, even if Michigan's defense is off. Their game against Northwestern was, quite frankly, just painful to watch. It just wasn't good. So I'm going to go the more consistent team, the higher ceiling, and the best player in Michigan.
Absolutely. We align there as well, just because, man, you watched Rutgers this last time out against Northwestern, and they couldn't buy a bucket. It didn't matter if it was Pat Spencer shooting the 3, who is supposed to be their best, perimeter shooter. Yep. Ever since they lost Mawat Mag, they do not have any sort of offense that's consistent whatsoever. And their defense, I mean, it's still Rutgers defense. They're going to force turnovers. They're going to play physical. But there's really just not a lot there. I just don't think this is a good team. I think when you look at who kind of finished the season strongest, they are right there in line with Minnesota as the worst team in the Big Ten right now. And so I'm going to take Michigan. I'm going to take Michigan to advance. They have the guards. They have a proven guy and a Hunter Dickinson who can make plays down the stretch if he need be. So, yeah, I'm going to advance them to the third round and play Purdue there. But so we have 2 different matchups here in this next game between number 5 seed Iowa, and I have Ohio State and you have Wisconsin. So in that Wisconsin-Iowa matchup, how do you see that kind of playing out?
It's so tough for me to envision Wisconsin beating Iowa 3 times. You look at the way the game unfolded in Madison, Rob. I mean, how many open threes did Iowa have in that game? Like, they were begging Iowa to take the threes. Iowa's not going to miss that many shots in Chicago. I will be astounded if they do. I think they released a lot of demons in Bloomington when they went 13-23 for 3-point range. I think Peyton Sandford is a guy that can really win you games. Like, if you want a guy, every team has to have a shot maker when it comes to March to advance in the tournament. Peyton Sandford, you're not going to find too many better options than him. I don't care if he shot 34% for the year Over the past 14 games, he's shooting 47% from 3-point range off the dribble, and I think 45% overall, which is, I think, on over 5 attempts a game. I mean, he is absolutely lethal. Sanford's got it. I think Tony Perkins can really, really do a lot of damage against him. And remember, in the first matchup against Wisconsin, Chris Murray didn't play. Chris Murray struggled the second time. I don't see how this Wisconsin team beats Iowa. But then again, Iowa's the biggest mystery team in this entire tournament to me, because we've seen them lose so many games against bomb tier Big Ten teams, and we've seen them go out and curb stomp Indiana, have a miraculous comeback against Michigan State, have a huge comeback against Michigan where Peyton Sanford had the 4-point play. What version of Iowa are we getting in Chicago? And that's why I think it's going to come down to for Iowa. But I can't envision this Wisconsin team beating Iowa 3 times. So I'm picking Iowa.
Yeah, and I will say, the kind of the narrative that surrounds the it's hard to beat a team 3 times is a little bit misleading, but at the same time, where it kind of does come into play is when you have 2 teams that are kind of interesting or like close in terms of talent, or you might have one team with perceived more talent. That's where that kind of variable comes into play. Yeah. I agree. I just do not see Wisconsin beating Iowa. I thought they were the worst team in the first matchup, the way they tried to close out that game. But yeah, it's just that kind of like you brought up, that Iowa volatility. Who knows what we're going to get out of them? At some point in the season, they were 360th out of 363 teams with 3-point shooting on the road. This is Iowa.
You've never seen the shooting. You've never seen a shooting split like that. I mean, they were so good at home, and then you just go on the road. It's like, what's that gif of that dude in the YMCA just chucking it off every single part of the backboard? Like, that's literally Iowa in that 2-game stretch. And they went 6 of 53. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, like there's no way. Like Robbie Hummel, who's one of the best color commentators in college basketball, by the way, just sat there like, I don't know what to say. Again, insert the gif of, I mean, what more can you say about it? It was crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that they beat Iowa 3 times this season. If they do, Iowa's got a lot more issues than they even think they do. And right now, that we're sitting here, and there are quite a few already. As we go down to that 7-10 matchup with Illinois and Penn State, again, this is a matchup that I think means a lot to Penn State. I think it means a lot to Illinois as far as their seeding in the NCAA tournament. I think they're obviously pretty much locked in there already, but when you see kind of that matchup, who are you liking there? What kind of edges do you see? Do you think that, there could potentially be a toss-up here? What are your thoughts?
I really do think it would normally be a toss-up, but remember, this is in Chicago. Yeah. Illinois is going to have a huge home court advantage in this entire tournament, depending on how far they make it. But again, Illinois has been so inconsistent to me. To me, they've been the most disappointing team in the Big Ten. Because I thought entering the season, I thought they'd be a top 10 team. I mean, Matthew Mayer, they have guys down the Coleman Hawkins, I think, is one of the best 2-way players in the league. I think he still needs to be developed a lot more offensively. But in terms of size, speed, skill, impact, the variety, ability to do different things, I think he's tremendous. Terrence Shannon's much more of a transition player. His half-court offenses really disappoint me. And I'm saying that, and he was a first-team all-league player, which is kind of ironic. But I'm going to go an upset. I'm going to go, I think Jalen Pickett is the best point guard in the country. I think he should win point guard of the year. I've been blown away by him this season. Seth Lundy, I think it's very important to him. Micah Shrewsbury, I think, has done a very nice job with Penn State. Cam Winters had a couple of big buckets over the past week. Illinois is the better team. They're going to have the home court advantage. I'm going to go an upset. I think Jalen Pickett's going to have some ridiculous performance where he puts up like 28, 9, and 7. Like Caitlin Clark numbers, essentially, and it won't surprise me.
Yeah, and I think this could be a game where we see like a 4.5, 5-point spread for Illinois. I'm just going to tell you right now, I wouldn't ever bet Illinois in that situation at all. Multiple possessions against, again, you said it, Jalen Pickett, who is an absolute gamer. I mean, this guy does it all. And he can make any shot, that's put in front of him. I am going to go Illinois. I do think that there is that home court advantage kind of like atmosphere that's going to be there. I think they are a team that has been in that situation in the past as far as the tournament play and making a run. It feels like they're always in the semifinals or the championship of the Big Ten tournament. And so I am going to take Illinois to advance there. And then as we go down to this 6 versus 11 matchup, we both have Maryland going up against Nebraska in round 2. What are your thoughts? Are we seeing an upset here, David?
Rob, I'm picking the Huskers.
I am too.
I'm picking the Huskers. I believe in Fred Hoiberg, which is crazy. I know, but I think the defense is going to be there. Maryland, to me, is still too inconsistent, and they're very not in the same tier as Iowa. But what Maryland team are we getting? I think Maryland's without doubt the more talented team. I think Jameer Young is tremendous, and if there is a reason why they beat Nebraska, it's going to be because of Young. If they make a run in the Big Ten tournament, it's going to be because of him. He's been really, really good over the past couple of months. But this just has that. I just have that gut feeling that I can't escape. I can't pinpoint it. It strikes me as if Nebraska starts the game well in the first 5 minutes, generates a bunch of stops, and if Nebraska controls the pace, it has the potential to really, really frustrate Maryland. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm picking Nebraska in this. I'm going to go back-to-back lower seed upsets.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think, like I kind of alluded to earlier, Kisei Tominaga, I do not want to bet against that guy in a tournament-like setting where you need a shot and he is having the ball in his hands, down 2. Oh, my goodness. And then we haven't really talked, but you kind of brought up Derek Walker, but great post player as far as just being that extra guy. Sam Griesel is a shot creator. He can make down, like a straight, just open shot if he needs to. I think this Nebraska team maybe doesn't have the depth, but they have the guys to at least kind of maybe pull off 2, maybe even 3 sort of upsets before they get tired of legs.
They're playing to get an NIT and to host the NIT as well, which is very, very important to the future of the program. Like there's a lot to play for that program. Maryland's in the tournament, the NCAA. Not that they'll be lacking motivation by any means, but Maryland's short-term future is locked. Nebraska is not. And that's why I kind of like them too.
Yeah, and I feel like everybody kind of has a belief this time of year, especially in the Big Ten, and especially if you finish hot like a Nebraska did, where maybe you can make a run. And you already beat Maryland, the last time you played them. So, I'm going with Nebraska to advance there. And then as we go up to the very top of the 3rd round, we have the double bias coming into play. So we have Purdue taking on Michigan. Michigan has that warm-up game. And what we've seen in a lot of these mid-major conferences so far, asterisks there, but a lot of these teams that already had a game under their belt are springing upsets against the double buys. So what are your thoughts on, Michigan going up against Purdue? Obviously, it's going to be the big man matchup again. We've only seen it once this season, and it was a pretty darn good game. What are your thoughts about who advances out of that?
Rob, I got to tell you, I don't have the balls to pick Michigan to beat Purdue, but it's not going to surprise me if this comes down to the final possession or 2. Mm-hmm. If I think Michigan's gonna be able to get done good in the first round against Rutgers, second round, whatever technically. But I'm very curious how Purdue is going to come out in attack mode. Yeah, will there be guys that step up on Zach Edey? Edey's going to get his, and Dickinson is going to make a living from the 3-point line and on the perimeter because they're not going to call fouls on Edey. Edey has not been in foul trouble really. It feels like at all this season, so he's going to pick and choose his spots carefully. If Kobe Buffkin gets going, Jet Howard gets going, I will take Michigan's backcourt from a ceiling perspective over Purdue's. And I think that's why I'm very tempted to pick Michigan. I can't do it. I haven't seen enough from them on a consistent basis. I think listening to Zach Edey's interview on Big Ten Network today when he was announced Player of the Year, I just think that Matt Painter's also a tremendous coach. I think he's coming in with a chip on his shoulder because remember, he lost in the finals to Iowa last year. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of unproven for them right now in the tournament. I'm going to go Purdue, but I think Michigan's going to make it a hell of a showdown.
I'm going to do what you couldn't do, and I'm going to take Michigan to beat Purdue. Listen, this Michigan team is just a couple games where they're clicking on their backcourt to make a run. They've dropped so many freaking close games this season. It's insane. And it really just comes down to who's taking the final shot when it's a 2-point game, when it's a 1-point game, when it's a 3-point game. They don't know. I mean, even the players on the court in the moment as it's happening with the 20 seconds winding down, they don't know.
Yeah.
it just takes that one game though where they somehow find that gel and they kind of make it work, and that's what March is literally all about, just making the run at the right time. So I'm going to take Michigan to beat Purdue, and that probably punches their ticket to the tournament as well.
I like the pick. Like I said, it's going to be, I think, one of the games of the tournament if that ends up happening, because as you mentioned, the big men matchup, you aren't going to find that many better ones. I think the backcourt of Michigan has a higher ceiling, but I think Purdue's can be more consistent. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think also kind of what plays into that is Purdue just kind of fading down in these second halves in the past 5 games they've played. But yeah, as we kind of move on to this next matchup, all right, we're leaning on you here, David. So we got Michigan State, the 4 seed, going up against the 5 seed Iowa. Interesting matchup. Obviously, this was a classic last time out.
I love it. I love it. I mean, the first 2 games were awesome. I mean, even the first matchup in East Lansing, remember Iowa had 2 phenomenal looks from Peyton Sandford to win the game. Didn't get to go down. And that's why I found it very cool from a storytelling perspective that Sandford hit the 3 to force the overtime when the 2 teams met in Iowa City. So I think he kind of got to expel a few of those demons there. But man, I love this. Again, like I love the idea of Tony Perkins and Tyson Walker just going in a showdown against it. Like when Tony Perkins is on, I don't think when Tony Perkins is at his best, he is one of the most lethal guards in the country because he just takes over on both ends of the floor. Again, the consistency is not there. I think he needs to realize how good he can be and place those expectations on himself. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of that matchup. I think this is very, very important to Philip Abracha and company. I'll tell you, man, I'm going against the betterment of my judgment. I think Iowa gets it done. I think they're the better overall team. I think Iowa's not going to have its shooting struggles. I think the Iowa fans are going to be there. I think Iowa could have a little bit of an advantage there as well. And again, this is where Tony Perkins and Peyton Sandford can really, really shine. So if they make shots, I'm picking Iowa in a shooting contest against Michigan State.
Yeah, and I definitely see that angle. I want to get there. So I'm an Iowa fan as well, just so people know who are watching this. Just because I don't think I've ever really put it out there on this YouTube channel, but I am an Iowa fan. I can't take them here. I think what scares me is they could lose against, in that previous game because of a horrible shooting effort, and it wouldn't surprise me. I'd be like, oh, that's what we've seen away from home all season long. So can they string together 2 great shooting performances in a row and match a Tyson Walker, match a Malik Hall, match a Joey Hauser? I wouldn't bet on it, and I do think Michigan State, I'm going to say it right now, I think Michigan State is the best team in the Big Ten for a tournament-like atmosphere. So I'm going to take Michigan State to advance to the semifinals there, and that's going to set up a Michigan State-Michigan game too, which is going to be pretty interesting.
And this is something that just got reported that I think is worth at least mentioning a little bit in terms of the Rutgers-Michigan matchup. Per a source, the NCAA Tournament Committee has confirmed that they will consider Rutgers' controversial loss to Ohio State as part of their resume. The Big Ten officially said the winning shot should not have counted. If Rutgers won, it would have been a road quad 1 victory.
What in the hell?
So that just I just found that out about 2 minutes ago. So that's going to be a interesting thing to follow.
Yeah, I think that shakes up a lot of people's perception of the bubble.
Yeah.
Goodness. Okay. Well, that's something to digest. But let's move on to this next matchup here. We got Illinois going up against Northwestern, at least for me, and then we have Penn State going up against Northwestern for you. So I'll lead it off with you. Who are you thinking advances to the semifinals out of that one?
I need a faux shop of my face carrying a wagon with Penn State in the wagon. I'm gonna have my little wagon, my Penn State wagon. I look, Northwestern's been good this year, and it's crazy that I'm trusting a Penn State basketball team in the postseason. But the only thing that's crazier than doing that is trusting Northwestern in the postseason. So I'm gonna go again based off the best player. Boo Boo, he's awesome. I Chase Audige. If you get March Chase Audige, that might change my perception. But Audige has been cold lately. Great on defense, not good on offense. I think Jalen Pickett gets it done. I'm going to pick Penn State over Northwestern again.
I love it. I love that you're carrying the flag for the Tens. And honestly, it makes kind of sense. They have guards. If you're a big fan of guards and think that they are conducive to tournament-like success, There you go. You got Jalen Pickett. You got the best guard, I think, in this conference. Um, I have Illinois Northwestern. I am once again going Illinois. I'm not buying, the Northwestern hype as far as, being a solidified tournament team. I think Brad Underwood could get this done in a one-off series. And man, we saw this be a game in Northwestern the first time around. Northwestern pulled away late, but I do think Illinois kind of gets some revenge here and pulls off a win. And as far as this next matchup goes, so we got Nebraska going up against Indiana. We we are carrying these double-digit seeds to the promised land almost.
Love it.
Who you thinking pulls out of that one?
This is when my Nebraska fandom, quote unquote, ends. I think Indiana gets it done. Trace Jackson Davis is there. Jalen Hood-Schifino, I think, is going to unlock another gear. I'm curious how the role players step up around those guys. I'm very curious how Race Thompson's knee is going to hold up, because I think he could be a huge X factor for that team if he's even close to what he was earlier this season. I think Nebraska also playing, I think was the third game in 3 days. I just don't think they're deep enough at that point. I think they're going to tire out. I'm going to go with Indiana.
Yep. We are in lockstep there. I just think that, kind of like you alluded to at the end there, tired legs are a real thing. We've been seeing it a lot with these teams that have to play that initial first round matchup by game 3, by game 4. If they get that far, the jump shots just start looking a little less fluid. The first step off the top of the key looks a little bit less explosive. And I think once you kind of eliminate Tominaga's explosiveness, and who else do they really got? A big man who's also going to be tired down low and going up against Trace Jackson Davis. That's a nightmare. So, I think Indiana probably wins that by double digits in that matchup. So we're going to be forcing a semifinal of, it's a little bit different here. So for you, we have Purdue going up against Iowa at the top of the bracket. I have Michigan going against Michigan State. So very drastically different there. And then the second semifinal, we have another kind of, the only common denominator is Indiana, and you have Penn State going up against Indiana, and I have Illinois going up against Indiana. So that is going to make it for an interesting semifinal there. All right, so let's start at the very top of the bracket here, where you have Purdue taking on Iowa in the semifinals. Interesting spot because, obviously this was the rematch of last year's championship game in the Big Ten Championship, and they've only played once this year again. So Purdue is facing off against teams that they've really only played once, or at least that's kind of how we had it as far as their road goes to this spot. Who do you think comes out on top here in a neutral site environment?
I mean, I think it's going to be Purdue. I think it's a bad matchup for Iowa. I mean, 7'4" Zach Edey, and with all due respect to Philip Obracha, he's all Big Ten third team, and he deserved it with his consistency this season and what he's been able to do. Iowa's got the double or triple team Zach Edey. I think he's done a very nice job of passing out those double triple teams. They have enough shooters that can get red hot. They prove that they can create their own shot against Iowa. And look, Iowa's defense right now is not good enough to make a run. And I think that's what ultimately is going to come down to. Iowa can play defense in stretches, and we've seen them where you kind of sit back and you're like, okay, imagine if this team actually did that for 40 minutes.
Right.
I mean, then you think about the ceiling that they have, or even 30 minutes, 20 at times, because their offense is just so reliable typically. I'm going to go Purdue. I just think it's probably arguably the worst matchup in the Big Ten for them. Mm-hmm. And Matt Painter's going to be on a little bit of a revenge tour, I think.
Yeah, I think if I had that matchup in my semifinal, I would also go to Purdue, and I think it would be kind of like there would not be any doubt. I think Purdue would win that without any kind of opinions coming involved there. But as far as my matchup goes with Michigan State, so interesting matchup here. Obviously, in-state rivalry, a big rivalry regardless, every single year, and this is a fun guard matchup, man, especially if Michigan is clicking. And it would be a interesting matchup down low with Matty Sissoko and Cooper going up against Hunter Dickinson. But I'm going to take Michigan State again, kind of like I alluded to early on in the episode. I think Michigan State is the best team as far as built for a tournament team in the Big Ten. So I'm going to take them to advance to the championship there. And then as we go down to that lower half of the bracket in that other semifinal, you have Penn State going up against Indiana. Who are you seeing coming out of that one there?
My wagon ends. I think they'll be too tired. I think Indiana. The only way Indiana, in my opinion, does not come out of the bottom of the bracket is if Indiana stops itself.
Yeah.
I look at the bottom. I think the top. It's almost more of a top heavy kind of Big Ten tournament. Whoever comes out of the top, I think is going to end up winning it. Spoiler alert for my championship. But the bottom it's you look at the teams, the way they're designed, and I just don't see a lot from it. I mean, I think Indiana is definitely going to come out of the bottom, and Trace Jackson Davis strikes me as a guy that's going to go for a 30, 18, and 7 at some point in this tournament. I think Penn State will be tired. I think Indiana, if it's hitting shots from the perimeter, is going to be the biggest key for them. I think they'll lock in defensively. I think Mike Woodson's going to make sure that they do. And if Jalen Hood-Schifino gets going, I'm going to ride them on it.
Yeah, I think if Jalen Hood-Schifino is the guy who kind of carries the torch for this Indiana team, and Trace Jackson Davis is like his co-pilot, and it's not just Trace Jackson Davis dominating down low, this team is very dangerous. But what we've seen at times is kind of like that Michigan effect, where Indiana sometimes doesn't really know who they're going to with the final possession, which it should feel pretty obvious with TJD down low. But the dynamic guy and the guy who's going to have to create a shot, I think in a lot of these situations, if you're down 3, if you're down 4 with 20 seconds to go, is going to have to be Jalen Hood-Schifino. And that's a lot of onus to put on a true freshman. So as far as my matchup goes with Illinois and Indiana, man, I will tell you what, when I was watching Indiana the last time out against Michigan, and it felt like the game was on lock. Indiana was up 7 or so points with about under a minute to go. And what happens? Indiana goes to the line. They brick 4 free throws in a row. Without Xavier Johnson, I feel like people are overlooking how big that injury was.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, their steady guy that like really held down everything. I think that's going to come back to bite him come tournament play because, again, who are your shot creators? You're going to rely on a true freshman to get it done. I mean, that could work for some games. I don't know if it's going to last all the way through. So I'm going to take Illinois to beat Indiana in the semifinals and advance to the championship game, which is going to set up Michigan State and Illinois for me. As far as your championship game goes here, so we have Purdue going up against Indiana. What are your thoughts as far as how that plays out?
That's going to be fun. I mean, if you look at the first 2 matchups, I mean, that atmosphere is going to be absolutely bonkers if that happens. I think Purdue's the better team. I think that the thing that scares me about Indiana and the thing that I think will really lock in is Indiana's offense is solely predicated right now because you mentioned they don't have a lot of shot creators. They have guys that are capable of hitting shots, but who's the ones initiating everything? Who's setting up everything? Their offense is either Jalen Hood-Schifino doing that or getting the ball to Trace Jackson Davis, get him going early, and then allow the defenses to double or triple team him, and then you rely on Jackson Davis to kick out and find the open shooters.
Yep.
That's what their offense is right now. That's not working against Zach Edey because guess what? They aren't going to be sending doubles to Trace Jackson Davis if Zach Edey is the one defending him. And that's why I think it's a bad matchup. It'll be a third time's the charm for them. I'm going to take Purdue in it. And it's going to be very hypocritical of me because I think Purdue is going to be out in the round of 32 come NCAA tournament time. So there's my boiling hot take for that already. I think they win the Big Ten title, though. I think if you do look at one team that is far and away, quote unquote, the best team in the conference, it's Purdue. I know they've struggled lately, but we've seen them when they really get going, they are the best team in the Big Ten. I think this extended few days is really going to kind of recalibrate them. And I think Matt Painter's too good of a coach. So I'll go the Boilers.
Yeah, and that'd be one of those matchups too where Indiana swept the regular season series, won both games. So I think if that matchup were to take place, I would also side with you. I would go with Purdue, especially if theoretically speaking they were in the championship game. That means they just won 2 games and they might be clicking a little bit better than what they have as of late. as far as my matchup goes, so I have Michigan State going up against Illinois. This is one that I really think could go either way. We've seen these two trade barbs in games in the past, and this just feels like a really fun last person to have it in their hands potentially wins a game type situation. So with that, give me the team with the shot creators, with the ways that can kill you. I'm going Michigan State to win the Big Ten tournament. So that would be my champion. Your champion would be Purdue. As we kind of move into like the future betting side of things, I think obviously I know one of your teams that might be your long shot, just given how you had the bracket play out.
My wagon.
Yeah, your wagon, man. So tell me,
My wagon.
At Penn State, I'm just taking a look at their odds, plus 2,500 to win the Big Ten. As far as to reach the Big Ten championship game, they are currently sitting at plus 1,000. So
I think that's a good bargain. I think it's a good value at least to do that. And I'll say this, and this is something I kept coming back to when I was thinking about as you were talking. If Michigan State gets past Iowa, I seriously might pick Michigan State to win it. Because, and not that Iowa would be the biggest challenge that Michigan State would face, but I do think that Iowa's style of play disrupts this year's Michigan State team a little bit. But Michigan State, as you mentioned, I think has one of the most tournament-built teams. So if I had to put a future on it, I think you probably would get a decent value on Michigan State because they absolutely could win the Big Ten with the way the schedule is lined up.
Yeah, and that would be kind of where my kind of future aligns with one of my long shots. I have a few different ones that I'm actually going to place. So, but let me actually, I'm gonna throw it back to you real fast here. So with the long shot, that's going to be Penn State. As far as just your winner goes, so you took Purdue to win the championship. That would be plus 175 to win it outright. As far as
here'd be my take. It's it's hypocritical. Okay. I don't think you get a lot of good value off getting Purdue plus 175. I think there's a lot of tough matchups in there. I don't think, given the way this college basketball season's worked, given the way this Big Ten has worked, I think it would be a mistake to, and again, I'm staying clear of all of that just because of my job conflict. I would be very, very skeptical to take a plus 175 for a Big Ten championship, just given how much chaos there's been in the conference.
Yeah, this screams like one of those conferences that's going to be anything but chalk. You know what I mean? It feels like there's going to be a lot of parity. Maybe not the 1 seed line, but at those lower seed lines, anybody can beat anybody, it feels like. And that's kind of where my futures align. So I have 6 futures total in this conference tournament. For my top line, I'm going to put 1 unit down on Michigan State to win the Big Ten at plus 700. I'm going to put 1 unit down also on Michigan State to reach the championship game at plus 300. And then, as we kind of go down to the lower side of the bracket, I have Illinois to reach the championship game at plus 400. And then Illinois to win the Big Ten at plus 1,200, a unit on both of those. And then my long shot, kind of what I alluded to, it's coming from the top side of the bracket, and obviously it hinges on not only winning their first matchup, but then upsetting Purdue. I'm going to lay 0.25 units on Michigan to win the Big Ten at plus 1,800, and then 0.5 units to reach the championship game at plus 800. So that would be kind of where my long shot lies there.
Ride my wagon. Come with me on the Penn State journey.
Oh my gosh. All right. You know,
Jalen Pickett, baby.
I think
Jalen Pickett is the type of guard that can carry you.
You're crazy. All right, but you know what? F it. Yeah, I'll throw a little bit. I'll throw 0.25 units on Penn State to reach.
Yeah, we're gonna reach. Get there. I would do a win. Now reach. Plus, given the way the bottom of the bracket works, it's not beyond crazy if any team makes it besides Minnesota.
Yeah, and even Penn State, if they don't have to play Indiana, say something nuts happens, like, or maybe not even nuts, but say like Maryland goes chalk and they beat Nebraska, and then they can match up well with Indiana. Penn State, Maryland, we just saw how that game ended. That was a close matchup, and I do think that Penn State could theoretically win that game. So yeah, actually, you know, I've talked myself. You talked me into it. I've also talked myself into it. I'm gonna lay something on Penn State and Jalen Pickett, the wagon to get it done.
The wagon.
Really want to thank David Eickholt for coming on today. my buddy, again, Dua Lipa lover, shout out to her if she's listening. Doubt it. Well,
For real. I got my artificial blue check mark now. So if I tag her, she'll see it if she goes to the verified tab. So you know.
That was your
insert
play
the Steph Curry gift with a hey.
How you doing?
Hey.
But with all that being said, y'all, I appreciate you guys checking out today's video, and we're going to keep churning out a lot of these on this channel. So be sure to tune in, place these futures alongside with me, and let's have a good time. We've been raking on these future bets. So with all that being said, y'all, I will see you in a future video. Take it easy.